The girl next door wasn't quiet. She was calculating her next kill. Everyone thought Maple Lane was safe, the kind of place where the lawns were always trimmed, the mailboxes stood straight, and every neighbor nodded at you when they passed. It was quiet, predictable, perfect. Until it wasn't. The house at the end of the block had blue shutters and a flower bed that never seemed to wilt. The curtains were always drawn just right. And the girl who lived there? Her name was Lacey Morgan, 17 years old, top of her class. Played piano every Thursday. She volunteered at the animal shelter. Brought cookies to the elderly neighbor 3 houses down. People said she was shy, sweet, smart. They didn't know Lacey. They knew the version she let them see. She didn't have many friends, not because she couldn't make them, but because she didn't want anyone that close. She smiled just enough, spoke just enough. She listened better than she talked, and she watched. Always watching. Teachers loved her. They'd say she was gifted, even brilliant. She never missed an assignment. Her essays were flawless. But what no one noticed was what she liked to write about. Death, motives, revenge. She wrapped it in fiction, cloaked it in metaphors, but it was always there, a fascination. Not with dying, but with killing. And in her room, that perfectly neat room with pale green walls and a shelf full of trophies, was a journal, locked, hidden behind her bookshelf. Inside, she wasn't Lacey the sweet girl. She was someone else. Someone darker, someone who recorded names, details, dates, patterns. Her first entry was written when she was just 11. It said, "Mrs. Halston leaves the back door unlocked every night. The dog only barks at strangers. Husband always works late. She watches me when I mow the lawn." At 12, another entry. "Jeremy keeps a pocket knife in his locker. Claims it's for self-defense. I saw him steal candy from the convenience store. Lied to the clerk without blinking." These weren't stories. They were observations. Lacey didn't think like other kids. She didn't dream about prom or college. She studied behavior. She read criminal profiles like bedtime stories. And late at night, when the house was silent and the world outside slept, she planned. It didn't start with murder. It started with little tests. She once stole a classmate's phone, not to sell it, but to read it. She memorized passwords, watched private messages, then slipped it back into their backpack. When no one noticed, she smiled. Not out of joy, but confirmation. The world was sloppy. People left traces, patterns, weaknesses. She made notes in her journal, added columns, started rating people in her life, from complacent to dangerous. She had her teachers, her neighbors, her dentist, the mailman. And soon, the pages filled with quiet assessments no one else could imagine. At 13, she watched a cat die. It had been hit by a car. Most kids would cry. Lacey kneeled beside it, tilted her head, and whispered, "How long can you keep your eyes open after your lungs collapse?" She counted the seconds. At 14, she made her first real move. A girl at school, Brielle, bullied others relentlessly. She humiliated a shy freshman in front of the entire lunchroom, called her disgusting, laughed. Everyone joined in, everyone except Lacey. Lacey just sat there, still, watching. 2 weeks later, Brielle's life fell apart. Someone sent screenshots of her secret texts to the principal, private messages, cruel jokes, inappropriate photos. Brielle was expelled. Her parents withdrew her. She vanished overnight. No one ever proved how it happened, but Lacey knew. She knew every key she'd pressed, every account she'd spoofed, every friend she'd baited to leak information. It wasn't about punishment. It was about control. Brielle became entry number 94 in the journal. A successful manipulation, no contact, no suspicion, maximum impact. Lacey was now confident. By 15, her mind had moved to higher stakes. She no longer wondered if she could cause pain. She wanted to see what it felt like, to remove someone. She picked her first candidate carefully. Mr. Dunn. Middle-aged, lived alone, retired mechanic. Nobody paid him much attention, but Lacey did. He didn't just watch the neighborhood, he recorded it. Every car, every light, every movement. He had a notebook, just like hers, but his was full of paranoia, not precision. One day he approached her on the sidewalk, asked if she had walked by his driveway the night before. His voice was calm, but Lacey saw something else in his eyes. He was trying to catch her in something, trying to flex power, so she added him to the journal. Entry number 127. Mr. Dunn is a collector of fears, also weaknesses, might know too much. She began her process. Observed his trash, found painkillers, heavy alcohol consumption. She checked the neighborhood camera grid. His house was a blind spot. She studied his routines. 9:30 p.m., sleep, 6 a.m. walk, every day without fail. And then one night, he didn't appear. Police were called 2 days later. Door locked, lights off. Mr. Dunn, dead in his chair. Cause of death, unknown. Toxicology suggested alcohol and prescription mix. But there was something strange. No recent prescription. No liquor bottle, just the perfect dose, administered in silence. They ruled it accidental. Lacey was already writing in her journal. Mr. Dunn, exit number 1, clean, no disruption. Sleep took him before doubt could form. She sat in class the next day like nothing happened, answered a math problem, smiled at her teacher, listened to music on the bus. No one knew. And that was the point. She didn't kill for anger, not for lust, not for greed. She killed because she could, because the world was sloppy, and she was perfect. His name was Aiden Crowley, 17, transferred in from out of state halfway through the school year. Quiet like Lacey, but not in the same way. He had this confidence, the kind that didn't ask for attention but drew it anyway. He sat 2 rows behind her in homeroom, never raised his hand but always looked like he already knew the answer. Lacey noticed him on day 1, not because of his haircut or his smirk, but because he didn't follow the rules she'd written for everyone else. She had patterns for her classmates, timelines, categories. Aiden didn't fit. He observed, but not in the passive way most did. He was clocking things, studying. Not her, not yet, but he would. And she wasn't wrong. It started small. He lingered longer near her locker than he needed to. He nodded at her in the hallway. He didn't try to flirt, didn't try to talk, just hovered on the edge of proximity, like he was waiting for the right moment. Lacey didn't react, but her journal did. Entry number 139. New variable. Crowley, Aiden. Transfer. Possible threat. Noticed my habits. Testing distance. She started watching him back. He didn't use social media. Rare for someone his age. No Instagram. No Facebook. His phone screen was always locked. His schedule? Loosely structured. He left school at different times each day. Sometimes he stayed late. Sometimes he vanished between periods. She tried a passive probe, left a book on abnormal psychology out in plain sight during study hall. He glanced at it, then at her. No reaction. But the next day he had the same book in his hand. Same edition. Different cover. That was deliberate. He was communicating, he was probing her back. That night, her journal entries doubled. She stopped writing in front of her window, started covering her tracks again. Not out of fear, out of thrill. She hadn't been challenged in years. For the first time, Lacey felt curious. They finally spoke the following week, in chemistry, assigned to the same lab table. He introduced himself with a half smile and a glance that lasted too long. "You're good at this," he said, gesturing to the equipment. "Precise." "So are you," she replied, watching how steady his hands were. They didn't flirt. They analyzed. Every word was a chess piece, every pause a calculation. For 45 minutes, they danced around conversation like 2 predators trying to sniff out what kind of creature the other was. That night, She didn't sleep. She read through every entry, every pattern, rechecked all her assumptions. Entry number 140. He's not watching me out of interest. He's watching me to measure how much I know. For most people, that would be paranoia. For Lacey, it was probability. 3 days later, she tested him. After school, she walked a different route home, one that crossed through the forest trail behind the old community center. She never went that way. It had no traffic, no cameras, no real escape routes. If he followed, she'd know. And he did. She heard his footsteps before she saw him. They were light, not a jogger, not random. Someone trying not to be noticed. She didn't turn around. She just stopped walking, waited, let the silence stretch, then said, "You're not subtle." He emerged from the shadows like it was planned. Hoodie up, hands in pockets. "I thought we were playing a game," he said. Lacey didn't smile. "I don't play," she replied. But she lied, because she was playing, and she didn't know how far she'd go if he kept pushing. They stood there, two ghosts in the woods, not talking about what they were really talking about. "I read your essay," he said finally, "the one about the dissection of empathy." "It was fictional," she replied. "Was it?" That night, she added a page to her journal, not a typical entry, a drawing, his face roughly sketched, and beneath it a list of possible endings. One was ally, another was opponent, and the last line said both cannot survive. Because deep down, Lacey knew the truth. Predators don't share territory. They circled each other for weeks. Conversations became cryptic. Aiden started wearing gloves to school, said it was for a skin condition. Lacey asked if it was contagious. He said only to people who couldn't lie well. They both knew what this was. He never tried to hurt her, but he knew things. He started dropping facts only she could recognize. That her piano teacher was gone for the week. That the neighbor's dog hadn't barked last night. That the mail didn't come until 2:17 on Thursdays. That wasn't curiosity, that was reconnaissance. And Lacey was no longer sure who was the hunter. One day after class, she found a note in her locker. Just a single line. "How do you pick them?" No signature, no handwriting she recognized. Just a question that punched her in the chest. She didn't flinch, she didn't answer. She just opened her journal and wrote entry number 150. "This is not a friendship. This is a countdown." She began to prep a contingency. She started monitoring his home, watching his windows, tracking his walks. She used a drone, rewatched camera footage from the school parking lot. She wasn't scared. She was calculating. Because she knew something Aiden didn't. He wasn't the first person she'd eliminated who got too close. But he might be the first one who understood why. And that made him dangerous. What neither of them realized was that someone else had already noticed them both, and someone else had just started watching. Mistakes are rarely loud. They don't scream when they happen. They whisper, slip in like smoke under the door, and by the time you realize it, it's already burning everything down. Lacey's first mistake wasn't trusting Aiden. She never did. It wasn't letting him near. She controlled the proximity. No, her first mistake was assuming she had more time. It started on a Sunday. Quiet, overcast. She was walking back from the bookstore with nothing but silence in her earbuds and a new copy of The Anatomy of Manipulation tucked under her arm. When she turned the corner onto her block, she saw a car she didn't recognize. Dark blue, parked 2 houses down, windows tinted, engine off. She clocked it immediately. Her neighborhood didn't get visitors without cause, and no one parked on Maple Lane and just sat there. But it wasn't just the car. It was the feeling. Like the kind you get when you step into a room and realize someone's already watching. She walked past it like nothing was wrong, counted 3 full heartbeats. And then she turned, fast, looked right at the car. The window rolled down half an inch. Not enough to see who was inside, just enough to say, "I see you, too." She didn't blink, just turned and kept walking. Her breath stayed even. Her steps stayed normal. But her brain? It was already firing off alarms. The car wasn't registered to anyone nearby. She checked within the hour. It hadn't moved by nightfall, and it wasn't there the next morning. That alone wouldn't have rattled her. What did? Was the envelope on her doorstep. No stamp, no handwriting. Just her name, printed in plain block letters. Inside, a photograph, grainy, black and white, taken from a distance. It was her, standing in front of Mr. Dunn's house, the night before he died. She stared at the photo for 12 minutes before she moved, not because she didn't know what to do, but because she was reviewing every possible response, every angle, every ripple it could cause. Someone had been there, someone else. It wasn't Aiden. His style was surgical, precise. This was messier, cruder, someone who wanted her to know they were watching but didn't want her to know who they were yet. She burned the photo, not out of panic, but strategy. There would be no fingerprints, no evidence, no emotional reaction. That's what they were testing for, fear. They wouldn't get it. But still, the pattern had changed. She was used to being 5 moves ahead. Now she wasn't even sure which board they were playing on. So she retreated, not physically, but mentally, locked down her behavior, cut back her presence online, disabled trackers, cleared browsing logs, rechecked all security cams around her house and along her school routes. The car never came back, but the watcher did. 2 days later, her locker had been picked, nothing missing. But her journal, the one she never brought to school, had a page that looked flipped. She knew the spine of that book better than her own hands. She knew how it fell open. And that day it fell wrong. Too loose, too exposed. Page 143, one of the coded entries about Aiden, had the tiniest ripple along the edge, like it had been turned, flattened, and returned. She stared at that single page for 10 minutes. Then she tore it out. Then another, and another. Every entry that could be interpreted, twisted, tracked. She didn't destroy them. She memorized them. Then she burned the paper. Each flame swallowed a secret, but the knowledge stayed. She carried it now. Not on pages, but in muscle memory, in her breath, in the way her hands stayed calm, even when her pulse hit 130. The next time she saw Aiden, he looked different. Not suspicious. Not smug. Worried, and that's how she knew. He hadn't done it. If he had, he wouldn't flinch. He wouldn't show emotion, but he did. His eyes darted toward her in chemistry class. His pen tapped too fast. His foot didn't stop bouncing. He was nervous. And she knew why. Because he'd been watched, too. After school, he approached her. No smile, just a whisper. "They're not watching just you." She didn't answer. She didn't blink. "I found a bug in my room," he added. "Behind the mirror. Audio. Crude. Amateur level." That changed everything. They weren't just circling each other anymore. They were both being hunted. That night, Lacey didn't sleep. She rewired her cameras, set up motion sensors inside her own house, moved her hiding spots, made backup journals, prepared aliases, cleaned her laptop, wiped her phone, and created a virtual dead drop, just in case the worst came fast. Because this was no longer a game about curiosity. This was about exposure. And exposure meant death. 2 nights later, someone broke into her house. She was ready, but not for who it was. It wasn't a stranger. It wasn't a masked man. It wasn't even the owner of that dark blue car. It was someone she had completely missed. Mrs. Doran, her neighbor, 62, retired librarian, made cookies, watered her roses at 7 a.m. sharp, walked with a limp. waved at every passing car. She'd been watching Lacey for years, because Lacey wasn't the first. Mrs. Doran had been watching Maple Lane for decades. She called it cleansing. She had files, notes, footage, and Lacey was her next project. Not because she was evil, but because she was competition. Mrs. Doran was a killer, too. But she was sloppy, old school, and Lacey? Lacey had just been forced to step into the open. The confrontation didn't end in screaming. It ended in silence. Lacey said almost nothing. She just listened, memorized, measured. She learned everything she needed. And then she acted. By the time the sun came up, Mrs. Doran had fallen down her own stairs. Neck broken. No signs of struggle, a tragedy. Just another freak accident on Maple Lane. But in Lacey's journal, newly rewritten in perfect code, there was a final note for the day. Doran Agnes, exit number 2, inheritance of silence complete, only one predator remains. And the next morning, Lacey smiled when Aiden passed her on the sidewalk. Because now, he really was the only other player left. By now, Lacey had grown used to patterns. That was her gift. Not beauty, not charm, not athleticism. She could read people like puzzles missing only one or two pieces. A twitch, a glance, a hesitation. They were all tells. Most people didn't even realize how exposed they were. They thought silence meant mystery. But to Lacey, silence screamed. So when she met someone she couldn't read, not even a little, it wasn't just unsettling. It was dangerous. It started with a substitute teacher, Ms. Reese, mid-40s, crisp clothing, perfect posture. Taught literature like it was philosophy and murder all at once. The students found her cold, distant. But Lacey was instantly suspicious. Ms. Reese didn't make mistakes, not a word mispronounced, not a single pen click or throat clear out of place. Her hair was always pinned the same way, same shade of lipstick, same coffee cup, same icy stare. And yet, no social profile, no digital footprint. Lacey searched, hard, nothing, no Facebook, no teaching history in the local board, no tagged photos. Ms. Reese didn't exist online. That was either paranoia or professionalism. And Lacey didn't believe in coincidences. On the second day of Ms. Reese's temporary assignment, she asked the class to write a character study. Something dark. Human nature unmasked, she called it. Lacey turned in a piece about a girl who watched her neighborhood decay from behind drawn curtains until she became the rot itself. Ms. Reese gave it back the next day. No grade, just a comment. Interesting voice. Do you think she regrets it? No red pen, no criticism, just a question. And Lacey hated questions. She didn't respond in class. She waited. After school, she lingered by the lockers until the halls emptied, then approached Ms. Reese at her desk. I don't believe in regret, she said. Ms. Reese looked up, slow and still. I figured, she replied, but you believe in observation, control. I can see that. Lacey didn't answer. She was scanning now, watching the way Ms. Reese's eyes didn't flicker, the way she kept her hands on her desk like she didn't need to protect herself. Most adults flinched under pressure. Ms. Reese didn't. That night, Lacey tore apart her school's network, searched every archived staff file, every substitute record, even the older digital hiring systems. Still nothing. It was like this woman had walked in from thin air. And that's when it clicked. She wasn't hired. She was planted. But by who? Was it a government agency? Some kind of behavioral monitor? An independent investigator who had picked up on Maple Lane's unusual incidents? Or worse, was she like Lacey? She spent the next 2 weeks shadowing Ms. Reese without making it obvious. She recorded her routines, her voice patterns. She checked her car. Clean, too clean, wiped down every day. Not a single fingerprint on the exterior, not even dust on the license plate. She was either obsessive or tactical. Then Lacey made her move. She left a test. In Ms. Reese's classroom drawer, unlocked on purpose, she placed a single sheet of paper. A list of names. Half were real, half were not. All were connected to Lacey's journal. Victims, targets, people she had manipulated. The fake ones were designed to look plausible. If Ms. Reese took the bait, she'd reveal her hand. But the next morning, the drawer was empty. Not just the paper, to everything. Pens, notepads, even the backup lesson plan folder. Gone. And in its place, taped neatly inside, was a post-it. It said, "You're not the only one writing stories." That was the moment Lacey felt her first chill in years. Someone was inside her head, someone with the same patience, the same long-game instincts, the same thirst for psychological dominance. She started to spiral, not outwardly, but in her internal structure. Her routines became tighter. She ate at exactly the same time every day. She checked every doorknob twice, then 3 times. She stopped journaling on paper, switched to mental maps, mnemonics, symbols on her calendar that only she understood. She cut Aiden out completely, stopped looking at him in class, avoided routes they used to walk, deleted his name from her phone. Because if Ms. Reese was watching, she couldn't afford any attachment. And still, it wasn't enough. One night she came home and found her bedroom window cracked open. Just a sliver. She never left it unlocked. Inside, nothing was missing, but her bookshelf had been rearranged slightly. 2 titles swapped. The book on neuropsychology, now sitting next to the one on mythology. Message received. This was a game of intellect now. Symbols, signals, mental warfare. She decided to confront Miss Reese. After school, no crowd, no teachers around, just the 2 of them. She waited by her car, shadowed in the lot, one hand in her pocket, heart steady. When Ms. Reese arrived, she didn't flinch. She stopped 2 feet away. "You're not a teacher," Lacey said. "And you're not just a student," Ms. Reese replied calmly. There was no threat in her voice. No warmth either, just something terrifying in its certainty. "What do you want?" Lacey asked. Ms. Reese studied her, long, measured. "To see how far you'll go," she said, "to find out whether you're a mistake of nature or an evolution." That line stayed in Lacey's mind like a brand. A mistake or an evolution. Which one was she? Because if Ms. Reese wasn't here to stop her, she was here to replace her, or worse, recruit her. Lacey didn't respond. She just walked away. And as she left, she heard the faintest whisper behind her. "Don't disappoint me." That night, Lacey locked herself in her room and wrote a new entry. In ink for the first time in weeks. Reese, unknown, threat level, elite, outcome, uncertain. This is no longer about survival. This is about ascension. It wasn't a scream. It wasn't an explosion. When it finally came crashing down, it was quieter than anyone expected. Because when Lacey moved, she didn't warn anyone. She just acted. It started with a fire. Not in her house. She was smarter than that. It started in the one place no one expected. The school library. 2 shelves, psychology and criminal history, reduced to ash in under 10 minutes. The fire alarm went off, but the blaze was already spreading. Not dangerous, just symbolic. A burn offering. A message. Ms. Reese watched it from the parking lot. Calm, silent, unmoved. And that's how Lacey knew. She was ready too. The next day, the school was closed for investigation. But that was just the smoke. The real explosion came later. A package delivered anonymously to the district office. Inside, files, printed emails, surveillance stills, student records altered, substitution credentials forged, all proof that Ms. Reese wasn't employed legally. It hit the news within 48 hours. Fake teacher infiltrates high school. Lacey didn't speak a word, but inside her mind, she was orchestrating the final act. Ms. Reese vanished before she could be questioned. No trail, no fingerprints, not even a trace of DNA in the classroom. She was a ghost, just like Lacey feared. But ghosts don't scare Lacey. They just leave space for her to take their place. With Ms. Reese gone, the world quieted. But something in Lacey did not. She wasn't done. Aiden came back around, cautious but curious. He tried to talk to her in the cafeteria, sat beside her in silence. He didn't ask what happened, didn't bring up Ms. Reese. He didn't need to. They both knew. Finally, he whispered, "You beat her." And Lacey replied, cold and slow, "Number I absorbed her." Because the truth was simple. There were no longer players left in the game, just her. She wasn't threatened anymore. She was the threat. But winning isn't just about survival. It's about control. And she still had one final move to make. 2 weeks later, she turned herself in. Not for a murder, not for a fire, not for any specific crime. She walked into the police station, handed over her journal, redacted, rewritten, coded, and said calmly, "There are things I've seen. Things no one else is paying attention to. You'll want to listen." At first, they didn't believe her. Then they started reading. Names, events, timelines, things that hadn't been solved, suddenly had a pattern. Cases that seemed disconnected, now had a thread. And she gave them just enough truth to keep them feeding from her hand. She wasn't confessing. She was negotiating. Within a month, she was relocated. Private school. Therapy program. Witness protection, they said publicly. But behind closed doors, agencies were circling. Profiles were being written. Interviews recorded. Lacey became a mystery wrapped in brilliance. Some thought she was mentally ill. Others thought she was a genius. No one could quite decide. And she liked it that way, because mystery is power. And power was all she ever needed. In her new dorm room, she had no books, no friends, no photos, just a journal. The first page said, "They studied me like I was the storm. But I wasn't the storm. I was the forecast." And they never listened. She watched the world move outside her window, a blur of people convinced they were safe, that monsters wore masks, that evil had a shape they could recognize. But Lacey knew better. Because she didn't wear a mask. She wore a smile. She didn't hide in the shadows. She waved to you from the front yard. She brought you cookies, got good grades, played piano, and all the while, she was choosing her next move, because predators don't retire. They evolve. And now? Now she had the attention of the world. A new environment, a bigger stage, a cleaner slate. The girl next door wasn't quiet. She was calculating. And she was just getting started. You see, sometimes evil doesn't wear blood. It wears politeness, good grades, a tidy room, and sometimes the scariest people in the world are the ones who never once raised their voice. If this story kept you up or made you look twice at the quiet ones around you, then you've seen what most people ignore. Hit that like button if you want more twisted truths. Subscribe for stories you won't hear anywhere else. And remember, not every killer hides in the dark. Some live right next door.